Hello, everyone. My name is Duden Wai. I'm the Technical Product Manager at Canvas Analytics, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about how to implement industrial AI in your operations using an outcome-first approach, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But first, some context. This presentation was given recently at the AIST Digital Transformation Forum. AIST is the Association for Iron and Steel Technology, and it's not just digital that they focus on. They think about logistics, they think about new steel technologies, and so this forum was very focused on what does digital really mean for the industry. It looked at different technologies like drones, 3D simulation, virtual reality, but also AI. And again, these are generally engineers and managers trying to understand what this means for their day-to-day work. And so Canvas was invited to share about our perspectives on how to implement AI projects, and we have a unique approach called the outcome-first approach that I'll talk about. So a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Duden Wai, and I actually have 10 years of industrial engineering experience that started in steel in Ontario, Canada, but also I've had some work in the automotive space as well. I've actually spent the majority of my engineering career in oil and gas. In all three of these industries, I worked as an engineer and saw the impact that data can have on productivity and ultimately the bottom line for the companies I worked at. In the steel industry, I was focused on logistics and how do we optimize the transfer of materials from one facility to another so that we can facilitate better scheduling. In the automotive space, it was all around root cause analysis, and whenever we find a defective part, how do we understand what caused it? And in oil and gas, I focused on drilling optimization, where how do we change our drilling parameters so that we can drill faster underground? And again, these were 5-kilometer-long holes that we're drilling into the ground. And now as a product manager at Canvas Analytics, what I've seen is that there was a gap between the engineering function and what the current capabilities are in the technology space around using cloud storage, computation, the algorithms around machine learning and AI. And so I'm taking advantage of this opportunity to close that gap. So a little bit about this talk. It's going to be structured into 3 parts. First, I'll talk about different ways of implementing AI projects, and you can think of it as an AI-first approach or an outcome-first approach. And step 2, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the outcome-first framework. And that was more conceptual so that in step 3, I can make it more real through a case study. So I'm going to start with a quote. Give someone a fish, you feed them for a day. Teach someone to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime. And I want to think about this in 2 ways. The first is about what AI truly is, and I want to spend some time defining that because the point of the whole conference as well was to really break down these myths of technology and really understand it. So AI, we throw it around, but it can be broken down into rule-based programming and machine learning. Rule-based programming is about giving a program a set of rules to follow. In a sense, you're giving it a fish so that it can solve one problem. You can feed it for a day. Machine learning is about a completely different set of rules. So you allow the software to teach itself. And in that sense, you let it feed itself for a lifetime so that it can tackle multiple problems or multiple different types of data or can be used for different applications. The other way to think about this is how you can approach AI projects. If you have an AI-first approach, you're very focused on, I need to solve this problem. And so you might do what you need to do to solve that one problem. And so you've given a fish and you've fed yourself for one day. But when you come across another AI problem, you have to go through that entire step every single time. However, if you follow a more outcome-first approach, and follow a systematic framework that you can break down the problem and you can essentially repurpose a lot of the work that you've done, you can then approach new AI projects quite easily after you've done that first one. And so you can feed yourself for a lifetime. And so again, I already talked about what the AI first and the outcome first frameworks are, but to think about what an AI first framework is, picture it as you're holding a hammer. A hammer is a tool But once you're holding that hammer, everything is a nail. And so you just hit everything that looks like a nail, feels like a nail, and it could be in reality a screw that you need a screwdriver to turn, not to be hitting on the top. And so again, AI is a type of tool that you need to be understanding when to be using it. So from an outcome first approach, you can see that the hammer is in the toolbox, but you also have a wrench and you have a flashlight. And so by looking at your outcome, you break it down into what's my real problem and what possible tools do I have in my toolbox that I want to use, and being very decisive about using it. And so a little bit more about the outcome first framework. Here at Canvas, we break it out into 5 stages. We think about the context. So what is the actual problem we're trying to solve? But we think even at the bigger picture of what does the company really care about? What does the industry care about? What technologies are out there? Just basically looking as broadly as we can so we understand what we're dealing with. And we distill it into outcomes that the customer really cares for, so that we understand at the end of the day, are we driving value for your business, as well as we can look back at these outcomes to see if this project was successful. And that moves into opportunities. So now that we know what we really want, how can we break it into smaller opportunities that we can tackle because they're more tangible, and we can build a solution around it. And once we know what opportunities we want or what are available to us, there's typically an opportunity to actually educate ourselves to understand the technologies, because we might have found out this technology could solve our problem, but we don't want to jump into it right away because we don't know enough. And so that ultimately leads into ranking, where once we feel confident enough and educated enough on the different types of opportunities available, and if it fits our business, we can now decide what we want to tackle first, second, third, and build a roadmap for a company. And so now let me jump into the case study. The context with this company is that they're a North American steel manufacturer, and they do both primary and secondary manufacturing. As in, they do blast furnace, basic oxygen and blast furnace operations, where they'll take raw material, your iron and your coke, and turn that into molten steel. But they also take recycled steel and run it through an electric arc furnace to turn that into molten steel. And so they have very different approaches, but they provide both. And ultimately, they produce 2 million net tons of hot rolled and galvanized steel for 3 industries: the automotive, agriculture, and infrastructure industry. Over the course of, I think, a few meetings, actually, we discussed with them what their true outcomes were. And while they might sound simple, it actually takes several conversations to be able to distill it into understandable concepts. And with this company in particular, we narrowed down their top business objectives into 4. They wanted to optimize their yield. They want to increase their yield, actually. They want to reduce their costs, and that's both from an energy standpoint, so how much energy requires to melt that steel and for the rest of the processes, as well as the cost of their materials that they're purchasing. They want to delay reductions in the sense of machine downtime, as well as the time in between operations. There's typically inventory because they need to schedule all the different operations required, but the faster you can get it through your system, the better you're allocating your capital and the more efficient you are. And lastly, reliability is about the quality of your product, but also it does in fact relate to the uptime of your equipment. And so from an opportunity standpoint, what we did is we tried to facilitate how to turn those 4 outcomes into as many use cases as we can think of. And we came up with 50. But how we did it was that we went from outcomes and asked them, what are some drivers that can change your outcomes? For example, with your yield, how do you change your yield? Is it that do you produce more? Do you reduce your outtime? Do you increase your uptime? as well as with quality. Sometimes your levers are you can produce a little bit slower to make sure your product is very good, or maybe you improve inspection. And so these are all different drivers to facilitate your outcome. Now that you have your drivers, we actually come up with what are some barriers that don't allow you to achieve those drivers. And then when we take those barriers, we ask, well, what if you could overcome those barriers? And so that ultimately comes up with our use cases. And we came up with 50 use cases around these 4 areas at the blast furnace. And then we did an educational bridge, essentially, to close this gap between now and what they wanted to know about implementing these technologies. And so we actually provided 3 different engagements with this company. We facilitated a more detailed version of this presentation, an outcome mapping exercise. We also gave an AI 101 workshop so that they understand AI, the different types of solutions out there, what are the technologies, what is the state of the art, what is the history that has gotten us here over the last 40 years. And then we introduced them to our platform so that they can play around with what we've really created, and they can see what it really means for their business. And then we took all those opportunities and put it on a value versus effort matrix. So when we talk about value, and again, we use a very simple matrix because we think actually simplicity facilitates the conversation much better. If you complicate it too much, you actually lose sight of what you're trying to talk about. And all you're trying to get out of this is to be able to extract your priority. So value is either economic, increasing revenue, reducing costs, or it could be strategic in terms of understanding more information or entering a new market. And effort is also on how much money invested is required, how much time to learn it or implement the project is required. Are there some cultural or governance changes that are required to make this happen? And so you want to be able to put all your 50 use cases on this matrix. And it's not shown here, but in the top right corner, we call this a high value, high effort quadrant, which is basically a big bet. The big bets are that if it works out, you get a lot of value, but there's some substantial risk involved. If you go a quadrant to the left, the top left, that's high value, low effort. That's almost a no-brainer. Of course, you want to pursue those opportunities. Now, if you have a low value, low effort, you still may want to pursue these because what do you have to lose? They're low-hanging fruit. But in your low value, high effort in the bottom right, you need to really be thinking about this critically on, is this really worth our time? And ultimately, that becomes your lowest priority opportunity. And so in that order, you can choose how you want to do 1, 2, or 3, but I would recommend doing 4 last. And actually, if you've already tackled all 1, 2, and 3, then more or less you can reassess everything in quadrant 4 and recreate this matrix. And so with this company, we took the 50 use cases and we actually came up with 8 projects we want to work on. And we currently have 3 in progress or even completed, and now 5 upcoming. And so we actually took the 8, we created a roadmap based on what we think we could do quickly, but also demonstrate some success, create buy-in and momentum. And now that we have that buy-in, we're moving quite quickly on delivering more value with them. And so the use case, again, demonstrated success so that we can do future work. And it was focused, one of the 8 that we did, or one of the 3 that are in progress completed, was to optimize the blast furnace process yield and quality. The outcome is that we knew if we can even optimize just a little bit of that process, it would equate to significant savings. The idea is that there's so much production in every single year that all we want to do is make this process slightly efficient, and we can build on that. Why we chose the blast furnace was because it's a very complicated process, and that's what makes it prime for AI. If it's not complicated, oftentimes it doesn't need to be an AI problem, and we encourage again, through the outcome mapping exercise, companies to think critically about when to be leveraging technologies like what Canvas provides. And so why it's complicated is because there are many, many variables involved and complex relationships that either require lots of physics or lots of measurement to understand what's happening. And so the actual technical problem that we're trying to solve is predicting the hot metal silicon and the hot metal production within the system. And ultimately, we were able to forecast the amount of silicon and production at multiple intervals, anywhere from 5 minutes ahead to up to 2 hours ahead of time. And what this allowed was to improve compliance to steel grade. They were able to see where is the silicon content going, so I can adjust it now as opposed to wait for that molten steel to solidify and perform a sample to understand if it was correct or not. And so again, our next steps now that we've been able to demonstrate that is to work on the rest of our pipeline and on that roadmap. And so that was a bit of a sneak peek into our approach, and I just want to reinforce that there are many ways to implement AI projects, and we have seen projects that were implemented AI first. They've seen an AI project done by a competitor of theirs, or maybe from a white paper that they've read, and they say, I want this. And that's an AI first approach. But what we strongly encourage is to be thinking about an outcome first. What is important for your business, and what are the tools available that can solve those problems? Deciding if AI truly is the right candidate or not. And really that's value and beneficial for all parties involved in these types of projects. And so as we saw with our client, it started with one project, but we worked on 2 more, and we have a pipeline of 5 more. And what I want to encourage is this idea of a roadmap and a journey. And so AI is a journey, and it's not a destination. You will be constantly working on this and looking for opportunities and building on top of new insights and building it deeply into your organization. And it requires a lot of change management in terms of training everyone and keeping everyone informed and aligned, and to see how it's truly adding value to your business, because everyone knows you're working on multiple initiatives at once. And so I just encourage you that sometimes it doesn't work out the right way, or there's a steep learning curve at the beginning, but it all is valuable and worthwhile at the end of the day. And so I hope this presentation was valuable, and if you have any questions, this is my contact information. You can find me at that email as well as that phone number, and also visit canvas.io. Thank you for your time.